Welcome back to Game Theory 101. I'm William Spaniel. Today's topic is Cournot competition with differentiated goods. In the past, we've explored two different extremes. On one end, we had firms producing the exact same good, so that consumers would not care whether it bought from one firm or the other. On the opposite extreme, we've explored monopolies, where a single firm is the only firm that is capable of producing a particular good. This lecture is going to explore what happens in between, where goods are differentiated but not completely unique. Ultimately, we're going to see something interesting. Firms intuitively benefit from product differentiation. However, investment in differentiation is expensive, and those benefits are diffuse. In other words, if I pay money to create a differentiated product, the product that I am now selling is different than yours, and so your product is different from mine. The difference, though, is that I had to pay the cost to invest in that differentiation, whereas you perhaps free-rided on that differentiation. As a result, a type of prisoner's dilemma can form. Both firms choose not to differentiate their products and share relatively low profits. In contrast, if both firms had committed beforehand to investing in differentiation, then both of the firms would have been better off. To see how this happens, let's start modeling product differentiation. What you see on the screen now is the setup for a standard Cournot duopoly. Each firm chooses a quantity of production Q, and the prices are set by the market. And that standard price function that we've been looking at before is some constant A minus the total quantity produced, Q1 plus Q2. And of course, that price has to be positive, so if Q1 and Q2 are relatively large, then the price is just zero. The firms have marginal costs of production, and they both want to maximize their profits. If you take a closer look at that price function, standard Cournot competition has no product differentiation. If you increase Q1 by a unit, or you increase Q2 by a unit, this has the same effect on the price. And moreover, the price is the same for each of the firms. In practice, this is weird for a lot of markets. Take cola as an example. On the surface, colas are very similar, but they do have differences as well. As a result, if Pepsi were to flood the market, it would drive down the price of Coke, but it wouldn't drive down the price of Coke as much as if Coke flooded the market instead. To capture this, we need to have two separate price functions, one for each firm. And we're also going to introduce a new parameter, B, which is some value between 0 and 1. Take a look at the first price function, P1, for firm 1's good. We still have that constant A, and we're still subtracting out an amount based off of the quantities produced. Here, we're still subtracting by Q1 for firm 1's production. But instead of having Q2 by itself, we're now discounting that value of Q2 by a factor of B. So if firm 1 is Coke and firm 2 is Pepsi, Pepsi flooding the market is not going to have as much of an effect on Coke's price because we're multiplying by B as compared to what would happen if Coke flooded the market with its own product. And if you look at firm 2's price function, it's the same sort of story. We still have A, we still have Q2, but now we're multiplying Q1 by that factor B. You'll notice that if you set B equal to 0, you have a monopoly. That's because any one firm's price is not going to be a function at all of the other firm's production. And if you set B equal to 1, then we're back at the same undifferentiated Cournot game that we've been looking at in the past. Everything else about the model is pretty much as we've seen before, We're still going to have no negative prices. The lowest the price can go is 0. We still have the firms with marginal costs of production C, and we still have each of the firms having an objective of maximizing profits. The slight difference there is that we are now having that price be the price function, which is unique to each of the firms. From here, the solution strategy is exactly the same as any other Cournot game. We're going to begin by deriving best responses. So, for example, we'll derive firm 1's best response to firm 2's output decision. So for any production decision from firm 2, we're going to find out what firm 1's optimal production is. And then we'll do the same thing with firm 2. And once we have both of those functions, we can find a pair of outputs that are mutual best responses. That's our Nash equilibrium, and that is going to be the Cournot equilibrium in this market of differentiated products. Let's start off with firm 1's best response. Their goal is to maximize profits, and their profits are the price of the good times the quantity of the good that they sell, minus their costs of producing that amount of the good. If we substitute in the price function that we're using for differentiated products, we get the second line. And then in that third line, we're just distributing that Q1, which will make the next step a little bit easier. And that next step is to take the first order condition. So we're going to take the derivative of that third line with respect to Q1 and set it equal to 0. Why are we doing that? Well, Q1 is the thing that firm 1 can control. And by taking the derivative and setting it equal to 0, we are looking at where the peak of that function is. Because at the peak of that function, we have a derivative of 0. So if we take that derivative and set it equal to 0 and then solve for Q1, we have A minus B times Q2 minus C1 divided by 2. And that is the best response that firm 1 has to any given production decision from firm 2. With the caveat, of course, that that amount needs to be positive. If that amount were negative because Q2 were too large, then firm 1 would want to produce 0 instead. Of course, we can do the same thing for firm 2. This turns out not to be very difficult because we just need to flip-flop all of those subscripts and then we're good to go. And so we have firm 2's best response function as A minus B times Q minus C2, all divided by 2. Again, with that caveat that it needs to be positive. So just as a reminder here, what this best response function is telling us is that firm 2 should produce that amount given any value of Q1 that firm 1 has chosen. What we don't yet have is an equilibrium. Fortunately, though, most of the hard work is over. We have two best response functions with two unknown variables. We don't yet know what the Q1 and Q2 values are that the firms are going to produce. But if you have two equations and two unknown variables, that means you can solve those equations. So that's all we need to do from here, solve these equations. One way that we can do that is by taking the value of Q2 and substituting it into the first function. So all I've done in line 2 is take the Q2 value in that first equation in the first line and remove it for what Q2 is equal to within the second half of the first line. And when we do that, you'll notice that we now have a function that just has a single unknown variable. There's just Q1 here. Everything else, A, B, C2, C1, those are all given to us. The only thing that's actually unknown here is Q1. But that means that we can solve for Q1. We can do that, of course, and if we do, we end up with Q1 equal to A minus C1 divided by 2 minus B times A minus C2, all divided by 4, and then all of that divided by 1 minus B squared divided by 4. You can see that this is much more complicated than Cournot competition with undifferentiated products, as well as being more complicated than what happens with a monopoly. So this is why you tend not to see undifferentiated games being explored first in class. Start with the simple things, then get to the more complicated things. Then we can go through the exact same process and end up with firm 2's equilibrium quantity of production, which is A minus C2 divided by 2 minus B times A minus C1, all divided by 4, and then all of that divided by 1 minus B squared divided by 4. Those are the quantities that each of the firms are going to be producing in equilibrium. We now take a quick look at some interesting comparative statics here. First, on per firm production, I've now illustrated this with A equal to 25 and each of the marginal costs equal to 1. And I am varying on the x-axis that value B, the parameter that is capturing whether the firms have a homogeneous product, which is going to be all the way on the right-hand side, or a completely differentiated product on the left-hand side. And you'll see here that as the products become more homogeneous, each of the firm's production is going down. Why is that? Well, when the products are very similar, the price that a firm is going to be able to command at any level of production is going to be lower. That means that the marginal cost of production looms greater, and as a result, they cut their level of production. This is a little counterintuitive because it's saying that when you have a monopoly, that's what's happening all the way on the left-hand side when the products are completely differentiated, you're actually producing more than what happens when you're in direct competition all the way on the other end. That's because as the monopolist, you're capturing all of the value of the product, and so that's incentivizing you to individually produce more. And in contrast, when we're in complete competition with one another, I am producing less, although collectively, both of the firms producing what looks like to be about 8 goods here are going to produce 16 in total, which would still exceed how much the monopolist would produce. So this is still square with our traditional understanding about monopolies versus duopolies and which one is better for consumers. The other comparative static worth looking at is per firm profit, and intuitively, we see that it goes down. That's because when we have direct competition with one another, not only am I producing less of the good, but I'm also selling it at a lower price than what I would be getting if we were in the monopoly world all the way on the left-hand side. But this gives rise to that prisoner's dilemma that I was describing at the start of the lecture. Firms have an incentive to invest in product differentiation. The further left you are on that figure that we just saw, the higher your profits are. The more you get, the more you differentiate. The trick here, though, is that each firm benefits from the other's investment. If I pay to invest in differentiation to lower B, that not only increases my profits, it also increases your profits. And therein lies the problem. I have an incentive to try to free ride off of your investment. I might want to just sit around and do nothing, hoping that you are going to pay that investment cost to make our products different. And if you do, then I get all of the benefits of product differentiation and have to pay none of the costs of actually obtaining it. But you might be in the exact same position. You might calculate that the extra profits that you will obtain by differentiating is not going to be enough to pay for that cost of the process of differentiation. And so we end up with homogenous goods because we're each not willing to pay for the investment necessary to differentiate the goods. Hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.